We're going to talk today about the 5 hidden mistakes that you may be making as a woman in leadership that make your bosses label you as not strategic enough, or you might even hear it in the sense of you're not ready for that next role. Now, I want to break down in today's live what that means. What does not being strategic enough really mean? And I'm going to show you how you can shift that, as well as an opportunity to download my free boardroom whisper checklist. If you want to access that, just DM me or comment below the word checklist, and I will get that over to you, because that is your first step in being heard, seen, and valued for your real impact with leaders. All right, so let's break down, what does not being strategic enough really mean? And when it comes to being, I've heard this feedback in my own career, and I keep hearing this from a number of different women that I speak to, and they're like, I'm so frustrated because I'm doing all this work, I'm delivering great results, and yet somehow when it comes to those results, when it comes to that next step and a promotion, I'm being told, you're not strategic enough, you're not ready yet. Well, what are they meaning? Well, what often gets left out is that they don't see you as being able to handle the future. Now, this isn't meaning like you are not capable of it. It just means they don't see you as capable of it. What they see is like, oh, okay, well, you're great at execution, you're really great at getting things done, but can you paint the vision for the future? Are you able to not only execute, but can you actually paint that vision of where we're going and then translate that into execution? So if you're getting this response of you're not strategic enough, then one of the things that we start to do within the LeadHERship Accelerator is also looking to, how do you communicate this? Because that can mean the difference between being seen as someone that's a great at execution, is a great doer, and being someone who is strategic and has a vision. Now, I know one of my clients at one point when we were talking about around this, she's like, oh my God, Kim, how do I communicate in a way that communicates that I have vision? How do I develop being a visionary? And here's something that I shared with her at the time too, is like, well, how do you talk about the future? How do you talk about what's the possibility in the next year, in the next 2 to 3 years? Do you talk in terms of opportunities? Do you talk in terms of what could be possible? Or is it more that when you talk, you speak reflecting back of the things that you had done, the things that you've accomplished? Now, I will say this, there is, unfortunately, and especially for most women in male-dominated environments, and corporate is still very male-dominated, unfortunately, what I found is that men, even with not the best of visions, or I should not even say that, but just let's leave it as very neutral, right? They're sharing their ideas. Men are very quickly seen as being visionary. Whereas when women, and this is a generalization, so I'm not saying that all men do this, and I'm not saying that all women do this, but in general, a lot of women, and I was guilty of this before too, is we share what we see is going to happen for the future, but we get so in the details that rather than being labeled as visionary, we are called details. We are being told, hey, you're really great at the execution, and I really could trust you to get it done, but you're not trusted to deliver that vision. Now, let's get into those hidden mistakes, because that's one of them. And I've just kind of sidestepped it, but really the big one is around when you start talking about what you're doing, you talk about your tasks, you talk about what got done, and you talk about activities, for example, in your update, like, hey, you know what? I had a great meeting with a client. We got them to sign a contract. The team is performing at the level they should be after having met with them and having had one-on-one conversations. All good, but it's not really like sexy and wow. The reason is because it isn't linked in any kind, in that sense, to specific outcomes or business KPIs or strategy that the organization is gearing towards. When you don't make that active link, when you don't link what all the things that you're doing actively and very concretely to business outcomes, you're allowing this up to interpretation for other people. And while you might think it's obvious, Kim, I mean, if I got a client to sign a contract, that means that I created revenue. Yes, but let's talk what kind of revenue, how much revenue was it, et cetera, et cetera. Now, one of my clients, I know she was in the process of moving from senior manager into a director role, and she was finding herself in a completely different type of market than 95% of her colleagues, which also meant that she was in a very niche market versus a very big market for her colleagues. In terms of numbers, they were a lot, like, her numbers were a lot smaller. So even though she was talking in outcomes in that sense, what she was missing here was making those outcomes relevant to the stakeholders. So what we started to do is, rather than her saying, hey, I created $20 million in revenue this past year, we started to relate it to what had been done previously. So because 20 million is still a fantastic number, but when you all of a sudden say, I quadrupled the revenue over the last year, there wasn't another colleague. She blew all her colleagues out of the water because there wasn't a single other colleague there that was able to match that. But then it started to even out the playing field in the sense of what she was doing. Now, that is one way of tying, rather than just talking about all the tasks and activities, turning it into what are the outcomes and what are the results, and tying those to key initiatives and key strategies for your organization. Now, a second hidden mistake is often the let's do more work. And I've been caught in this one. I know most of my clients have been caught in this before as well. It's like, well, if I'm not strategic enough, then I must not have proven that I'm capable of doing it. So let me do more work. Let me take on another project. Let me take on that, what looks like a high visibility project, to prove that I'm strategic enough. Except it's never about the doing more work. What it's about is engineering the visibility for yourself in your organization. And you don't engineer that visibility with more work. The third mistake that I often see is, so it's slightly related to the second, right? Or doing more work, but it's this expectation that the work that you do and the results that you achieve, that you will get credit for that they will naturally see the work that you've been done. And I get it. We grew up in school oftentimes of like, if you work hard enough, you're going to get to where you want to go. People will see what you've done, but it isn't really true. Let me just ask you something very simply. If you are looking at especially if you work in an office environment, do you notice when the bathrooms get cleaned? Do you notice when the floors are cleaned? If you haven't seen somebody do it, you see it's clean, but you don't know who did it. You don't know, you just know it's been done. And that's similar to when you expect your results to speak for themselves, and they don't. Because what does get heard, what does get seen, is the results and the achievements that get spoken about, that are promoted. That's similar to, I always like to compare it with, for example, there's so many amazing singers, songwriters that exist in the world, but we only know a fraction of them. Why? Because only a fraction of them are being promoted. Only a fraction of them are really seeking out platforms that get them to be seen, which then leads to them being recognized and being promoted. The same goes on a smaller scale for you inside your organization. While you are doing the work, while you're getting the results and you're getting the achievement, if it's not recognized by anybody, the question is are you really actually getting what you deserve? So the third mistake is assuming that your work is going to speak for itself. It doesn't. That's where you need to learn to speak up for it. Now, if you're wondering, Kim, how do I even start on that? Then just boardroom whisper checklist in how do you start promoting the work that you're doing? How do you start taking those results and implementing them and sharing them in meetings and in conversations in a way that still feels natural? So if you want to get that boardroom whisper checklist, comment the word checklist below and I will get that over to you. Now let's talk about the fourth mistake. The fourth mistake is around this expectation, and there is a I wouldn't call it a double standard as such, but it's more of an expectation from in general as a society that confidence is when you are the one that's always speaking up. You're the loudest voice in the room. Now, that does really win a lot of arguments at times. We've all been there. I have been there, being like, I have a better idea and I know this is going to work. And I see a lot of risks or things that aren't correct in the idea that somebody else who's talking louder and taking up more space is sharing. But that idea gets chosen because of the confidence. I really put this in quotation marks because it's a very extroverted type of confidence, but that doesn't mean that beyond that there's a lot of competence or that there is really great material there. Versus and this is more of a masculine type of way of being, oftentimes is being much more like bravura and really like loud. Whereas for a lot of women, we tend to be a little more, we expect our competence to speak for itself, and then we are more quieter in terms of our confidence. It doesn't mean that you're not confident. It just means you may show up being more quiet and waiting for your opportunity to speak, or you only share things when they're relevant, which then leads to others when they see you and when they're working in with you in a meeting to kind of discount what you have to say. So that quiet confidence is, let's turn that around. This does not mean, I do not want to get you the idea of like, okay, now I have to start shouting in meetings. Now I have to be the one that talks all the time in meetings. No, there are ways to amplify your message. There's amplify your visibility in a meeting without having to become completely somebody else. So that's the fourth mistake, right? That your quiet confidence and competence is being trumped by somebody's extroverted confidence and their loudness. Now let's get into the last one, the fifth mistake, when it comes to you're not being seen as strategic enough. Now, this is a really big conversation that I had last week with one of my clients, and that was around the difference between managing and leading. Now, she has just stepped into a brand new role. She's so excited about this, and she's like, oh my God, she was finally like, what is the difference? Like, when am I going to be leading and when am I managing? And the reason that we had that conversation was because as we were talking and she was sharing her challenges, I asked her, I'm like, so how do you want to show up? Do you want to show up as a leader, or because I know you can, or are you going to continue showing up as a manager? Now, what's the difference? The difference is in sense of what type of accountability and responsibility do you take, and how do you approach also your team, but also the conversations with your bosses and your more senior leaders. So to really bring this home for her, because she was managing a team and she's like, I'm my boss, we're managing this in this transition right now. How do I do this? And I don't know. I feel like I need more clarity around who's got what type of responsibilities, which team members belong to me, and which ones do I split with another department. Great, fantastic. You can go, and that's what I said to her. You can go to your boss and say, hey, I need you to clarify this and come with your questions. That's managing. Or you can lead and say, here's in my experience because they had hired her based off of her background and her experience, of course, like this is how I see the structure of this team and the splitting of resources work the best. Yes or no? What's the difference in those? One is you're just kind of, you've got like a list of like, okay, I've got these tasks. I've got to manage to make sure that I get to the end result. And the other is really dealing with, hey, I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to use everything that I know, all my experience, all my knowledge, and I'm going to create a solution for this in terms of how I see that this would be the best solution. That's a big difference. Now, if you're still kind of going, oh, I'm not really sure, I'm going to give you the same metaphor that I shared with her. So imagine you're hired in to manage the bread department of a bakery, right? Most of us can imagine a bakery. And her boss, in this sense, was the owner of the bakery. Now, you have multiple teams. Your team right now is doing the bread. You've got another team that you're not managing, but they are doing the desserts, like the pastries, right? What happens if you're managing? If you're managing, you would say, oh, look at that. That team also needs a number of the same ingredients that I need in order to make my bread. How do I make this work? And then you would go to the owner and say, well, you know what? I need the yeast, and I'd see the pastries also need the yeast. I don't like, how do we make sure that we get that split? Right? You are still like, yes, you're getting the process managing the process, but you're still bringing it back to your leader in order to solve the problems. The leader, if you're going to step into that leader, is like, hey, I'm going to solve this problem. I see this is coming up. Oh, I'm going to converse with the pastries to figure out how do we split the yeast. Another example, if you find yourself in the process of like, okay, I am responsible to ensure that I have 50 loaves of bread baked by 8 a.m. every morning. Great. Thank you. Fantastic. What happens if all of a sudden you're short on flour? Do you run to your boss, to the owner of the bakery, and go like, I don't have enough flour. So, what do we do? Or are you going to feel to yourself, I can fix this? Does that mean that you're going to go, maybe go buy the flour at a different store, right? Like, you solve the problem as far as you can do it within the resources that you have. That's the difference between managing and leading. And oftentimes when you are being told you're not strategic enough, you're likely in the managing aspect of the role versus showing up as a leader in the role. All right. Now, just to give a quick recap, here are the 5 hidden mistakes when it comes to, excuse me, here are the 5 hidden mistakes that make your boss, your senior leaders, label you as not strategic enough. Number 1, you keep doing more work, but it's not leading to them seeing you any differently. Number 2, you're talking in terms of tasks and activities versus outcomes and business results, linking it to the strategies. The third mistake is assuming that they see your work and your results and credit it back to you. You're expecting your results to speak for themselves. Guess what? They don't. Number 4, your quiet confidence and competence isn't trumping or is not a match for the extroverted confidence that is getting rewarded. So that's the loud voices, right? The one that talks the most in the meeting. Like, they must know what they're doing. And lastly, you're managing, you're not leading. And if you're finding yourself in the managing zone, then it's very natural that your leaders, your bosses, are going to label you as not strategic enough or not ready for that next role. All right. If you wanted some help with this, a first really great step is to grab my Boardroom Whisper checklist. That is, just comment the word checklist or click the link in the caption, and you can grab that. It's going to give you specific scripts on how to speak and incorporate your results so that others will start to attribute those results to you, and you can start to raise your profile and visibility so that you are seen as more strategic. And if you're ready to go even deeper in on this and you're ready to lead at a level that you're already performing at, no one's seeing that, then I encourage you to apply for the LeadHERship Accelerator or my one-on-one mentorship. And if you're interested in that, then comment the word or DM me the word accelerator, and we will start to have a conversation on that. Because inside the accelerator, in my one-on-one mentorships, that is where we turn all of these mistakes and insights into real systems with proven strategies and the language that you need to create and engineer the visibility that gets you promoted, gets you salary raises, and gets you the respect and the authority that you've earned. All right. Thank you so much for joining. Any questions, please drop them in the comments.